In an ongoing series, digital media specialist Mike Colón has been highlighting Center District fire officers as part of a project centered on documenting the role of command and the impact it has on the fireground. For the first interview of this series, we sat down with Deputy Chief of Administration William Johnson, who in his almost 40 years of service to West Haven Fire Department has been a fire officer for 23 of them. Today's interview subject is Deputy Chief of Administration William Johnson, who has been with the West Haven Fire Department for 39 years and has held the rank of lieutenant, as well as day captain, and currently Deputy Chief of Administration. So, Chief, obviously a lot of knowledge in your 39 years, both as a firefighter before you were promoted, but what's interesting in your 39 years is over half of that has been spent as a fire officer. You made lieutenant in 2001, you were a lieutenant for a very long time, had the day captain's role, and currently the chief's role. So definitely a lot of experience in that facet of it too. But just over the years, gathering experience as a senior man and learning from other fire officers, do you recall the first fire you specifically had command of?
Yeah, it stands out, and for a lot of different reasons. So we'll have to take a quick walk back in time.
Mm-hmm.
At the time when I was promoted to lieutenant, and off that list I was second promoted. Then Lieutenant O'Brien, now Chief O'Brien, was promoted first and ahead of me. We were both on A shift. And Lieutenant O'Brien was at Engine 25 on Molloy Road. I was on Truck 22. Back then, the lieutenants rode the aerial. So it was very unique and not done before, and to my knowledge, not done since. Then Captain, who was retired, Deputy Chief Ed Sweeney, Captain Sweeney at the time would take Lieutenant O'Brien out of fives and put him in headquarters and put me up on the hill at Engine 25. So we'd have the experience of doing both jobs. It happens currently, and it happened back then. You'd get an overtime at outstations and other stations, and you would go and work them. But you never really got in a comfortable mode of doing that because you were always stationed either at one or the other. And prior to Captain Sweeney doing that, that was never done. If you're a lieutenant at fives, or I'll go even farther back, lieutenant at Engine 24, which used to be at Park Street, that was it. You worked in that building alone, on that apparatus and that apparatus alone. So Captain Sweeney had rotated us back and forth a few times, but the first time he did it, sure enough, we get a structure fire on Linden Street, which is the dead end off West Spring Street, last house on the right. And also, back then, Engine 25 was just two men. So it was myself and firefighter Matt Forsythe was my driver. And as soon as we came we took the right-hand turn down the left-hand turn, down the hill, we could see the column of smoke in the air. And we knew we were going to work. So we were so close to it. It was literally at the bottom of the hill. We got there in a lot of time. Lucky for us, hydrant right across the street. Told Maddie, give me the tank, hook up, which that close to the structure. The SOP would tell you to hook up big, and that's what Maddie did. But he charged my line and gave me water first, and I went to work putting the fire out. I hit it from the exterior real quick. We had a fire in the C and D corner of the structure, and it was self-exiting out the window that was there. And from there, after a brief, knockdown, I came around back to the A side, went in the front door, and finished the push out the window. And upon arrival of headquarters units, the fire was out. So, being in command, I gave a size up, told them what we were doing with regards to an attack line and our water supply, so the incoming units would know what we were doing. Left the front of the building for the aerial, did everything we were supposed to do, transmitted that all over the radio so they knew before they got there. And when the fire was knocked down and under control, I said so over the air. And it being as, they're actually coming around the corner of the dead end at that point, and talking to some of the firefighters there, it's not they didn't believe me, they're like, no way. But we in fact had it out. Maddie did a great job. I got lucky. the fire did what it was supposed to do. It went out. And at that point there, the pipe man and engine driver, retired badge number 1, Willie Bruno at the time, and I forgot who was on the pipe and who was driving 22, Lieutenant O'Brien. All those guys didn't get to do anything. The roof guy didn't get to cut a hole. The pipe man didn't get to fight any fire. The hydrant man didn't get to do his job because we were hiding right in front. Matty hooked up big on his own. So it always stuck out because it happened a couple other times with myself and firefighter Forsyth. It happened in a mutual aid situation in Meadowbrook Apartments in West Shore. We were the first ones there and had a kitchen fire not only under control, out before the West Shore units got there, again, to their disappointment. But that was the first fire as a lieutenant that I had. We were first on scene, and I was responsible for taking command. And it always stuck out because, like I said, the other fighters that arrived were pissed because no one got a chance to play. Only me and Matty did.
Well, there's a component, you kind of touched on it, of the size up as well, where naturally, even if you're not a fire officer, you're already thinking when the box comes in, okay, here's where the house is, or here's where the apartment complex is, here's where I should probably be, we're looking out for this, that, and the other thing. As a fire officer, it's more the same, but it's different because not only are you factoring in your own safety, but the safety of those working underneath you. You want to make sure that you give them the best conditions possible under some bad circumstances to work in, not only get the job done, but get it done without, God forbid, getting hurt. So for you, on the way, on the rig, what were some of the things that went through your mind, and what helped you decide on the fly, with so much pressure on you, okay, here's what we'll do, here's the best way to approach this fire, while also making sure we don't jeopardize our personnel's safety?
That's a great question. And so I'm going to reflect back again to my time as a lieutenant up at Engine 25. All the time, when we were either going out in Fives area first due, if you will, and or coming down to this end of town behind a supporting this headquarters group. My driver, Matty, had quickly became an inspector thereafter, and then I had Lou Fogno with me. And we would immediately, while getting dressed, start to discuss our plan. And one of the primary things we always paid a lot of attention to, especially and specifically coming to this end of town, was to come into what we used to call the backside or the back door. Because coming in the same way and behind the Elm Street arriving companies did us no good and did them no good if we would be second or third, fourth apparatus behind with 21, 22, 27, and so on. So we would always want to arrive from the opposite side and come into it instead of being behind it. So that always took some which way we go and talk. Where's the secondary hydrants talk? If they had a complication or a compromised hydrant, again, if we were then behind them, we'd have to back out and turn around or go around the block or do all this other time delaying moves to set up a secondary water supply. So we always focused on coming in the opposite way. But again, size up started for us while we were getting dressed, and it was discussed the whole way through. If anybody, and for a long time it was just the two of us, we then transitioned to 3 men at Fives for the tail end of our time together, and now we know it's 4 men, 4 firefighters up there now. And anybody that was riding, and including utility firefighters at the time, had any knowledge of the building or getting a fire in my old neighborhood, I knew what houses were what numbered, I knew what streets were, I knew where the hydrants were, and we'd always share that information. So everybody arriving on scene, from our apparatus at least, had a little bit more going for them, not visually but mentally, upon arrival, as you discussed in your question. But the size up again, I always told the lieutenants and personnel fives to always go through that territory and the response area of fives to learn it. Especially in the West Shore sections and Allentown sections, because we do mutual aid and we're first in on those two ends. And we beat West Shore in just because of closeness, and Allentown in just because of closeness to a couple of their sections of town, which is why the mutual aid system not only works as well as it does. This is one of the reasons why we did it. Why shouldn't fives be going? We're closer than they are. And then we transitioned into those changes. And one of the things that came to my mind, I mentioned earlier, Meadowbrook Apartments off Meadowbrook Road. I would always tell the people up there, drive through there, know the buildings. So when you get a building in the 300s, you know what section buildings it is. And you know you better hit the hydrant coming in at Gregory and Meadowbrook, because that tail end doesn't have a hydrant in it, and it's a dead end section of the Meadowbrook Apartments. Know where the hydrants are located in Meadowbrook. And again, just as an example, you should really try to learn in your immediate response area where a majority, if not all, of the hydrants are. But in the middle of the night, anyone could have a forgetful moment, and you're drawing a blank for a little while, and that's why you need to rely on each other, and not just the drivers or officers up at 5 should go through those first response areas. The people who work there on a regular or all-the-time basis should research that area so they just have a better knowledge of where they're going in the middle of the night, when sometimes you're a little froggy and you don't remember as clearly as you normally can and will. So the Meadowbrook section was always a high concern of mine for obvious reasons, and the Dogwood area for Allentown was always, again, multiple high residential occupied apartment complexes that obviously give you a lot of complications and things to deal with if there's a structure fire there. Not just your starting with size up through your attack, through your water supply. While you're doing all that, your primary concern is safety of your crew and the civilian public. And so that's a lot. And fives, Engine 25 has changed over the years. There was a time where they didn't own the whole highway. Now that company owns the highway from the Milford line to the New Haven line. And we're the only company that does that. West Shore has their end, Center District headquarters has their section, and so on, but 25 has the whole thing, end to end. So there's a lot more to know. You have to know when they tell you in the middle of the night what exit and or southbound, northbound, what the best way to get there is. Do you have to go to New Haven and turn around? Do you have to go to Marshall Road and turn around? Do you just jump on at Campbell Avenue? Do you jump on at Sawmill Road? These are things that you always have to know and remember and discuss before you get in that truck and start going. Because you take the wrong exit ramp on ramp, and that's going to delay you a lot longer than you want to be delayed. So size up is huge. You have to know your response, your immediate response area, and I advocate to the firefighters today, just go out there and learn the district. It's the only way you're going to learn.
So there was a component of your father as well. You got the chance to work under him for 22 years, 6 of those years as a lieutenant until he retired. And we know his legacy here. He's one of the longest serving members that we've ever had. He's the longest serving chief of department. So naturally, you saw him in all his ranks from lieutenant all the way to chief of department, how he handled emergencies, both just as a son and, of course, as one of his subordinates. What are some of the biggest lessons, directly or indirectly, you learned by observing him in command?
It started young. Even before I got on the job, he would come home and tell me about fires and tell me about the fires that he didn't think went as well as they should, or things that he would want to have seen or done differently himself, or the firefighters have done differently. And he was always an advocate of quickness, aggressiveness, with a high concern towards safety. Not quickness out of control, but aggressiveness out of control, but precise aggressiveness. Get in, knock down the fire, and move on to your next steps, whether it be ventilation, search and rescue, salvage and overhaul. And he always kept a little index card in his car, and he'd always read it to himself before he went to every fire. And I asked him about that. He says, "I don't forget it." He goes, "I just want to read it one more time before I arrive, so I don't ever miss something." And he taught me how to be a firefighter. He taught me how to be aggressive and how to, as I say it to some of the young guys, and it was his words, not mine: stay low and charge hard. And he used that credo in a lot of other aspects of life, not just for firefighting. And it was always a learning lesson. I remember my first fire as a firefighter. I was on 21. We went up to Coleman Road Apartments, and there was a structure fire. It was venting out the rear of the building. 25, two men got there first. They were pulling lines. We went in the front door. Myself and retired lieutenant, he was firefighter at the time, Gary Casista, under the command of retired Captain Milt Horban, and we had a rescue on our first fire. And that's very rare. We got inside, and it was a rolling kitchen fire. It was consuming majority of the apartment, and I remember Gary screaming, "Keep it in the kitchen." So I took a defensive spot and did that. And next thing I know, I hear him say, "I got a body," and he's crawling past me. So I then reversed my line and protected him out the front door, rolling the ceiling until I saw him come out. Went back to work putting the kitchen fire out, and came outside, and wow, this is easy. I thought they were all going to be like that. Well, they weren't, needless to say. But I remember going home and my father saying, "Why did you do this? Or what did you see?" And so as soon as I got that, I saw the glow in the ceiling, so I started to put it out. He said, all right, well, he goes, "What did you do when Gary said he had a body?" I said, "I thought I better protect him and the civilians," so I just kind of soaked them down and rolled them out the ceiling as I saw them go through the, dragging them and crawling, of course, out the doorway. And he looked at me, he said, that's what you're supposed to do. Who told you to do that?" And I said, "Well, you have 100 times." So, that's kind of what the things I remember from him. So, yeah.
A lot of good lessons there for sure that are still making a positive impact all these years later. Now, there's different components of command. I've heard you and I've seen you at a few boxes where some of them you were in command for. I think I recall you being in command of the Savin Avenue fire that originally came in as a still. And in California Street, you were safety. So for those that may not be familiar, what's the difference and how does one know, okay, I'm going to take command of this, or as you did in California Street, I'm going to take safety? What's the difference between the two?
Well, so safety is that you have safety of the fireground, of not only the personnel and the civilians, of course, but the integrity of the building. You have to read the smoke. You have to read the building. Does the roof look like it's going to fail? Does the back deck, second floor deck, first floor deck look like it's going to fail? Do you have some interior degradation of the building that's going to have collapse and problem? When, if, or should you pull your firefighters out? So that's a key point to safety. And when you do it or when you don't do it, a lot plays the role of that. Using Savin Avenue on the example, we were getting conflicting, not reports. It was a tricky fire. It was a second alarm, and it was a pocket hidden fire. But we had smoke in every unit, so we were chasing it, if you will, and trying to lock down exactly the seat of the fire. And we just needed more knowledge and intel of what was going on. So I took command from Captain Farley and sent him back in there to check this, check that, check for this, look for that. And he came back out and we had a face-to-face together, and that's when we knew, okay, we got it. It is where we think it is. We've stopped it in its tracks. It's not extending into the other units. And then we focused on that. Okay, then now that we know exactly where it is and what it is, let's finish what we do and put it out. And that's what we did. But there was a lot of moving parts to that before we got to that point. And so that was a circumstance where command was transferred and I took command. Other fires where there's a lot that plays into that. Sometimes the last thing I would want to have done is we've had some new officers and we have some new captains, and they're doing a great job, to come in there and take command from them when it's unnecessary to do that. So to defer to taking safety, because it's one of the instant command boxes that we have to check off. So you become safety. You do a quick 360. You make sure you have a visual knowledge of the structure and the things that you should be looking for. Know where the lines are going in. On the back side, what you won't be able to see from the command post is the exit doors or the egress doors in the BC corner, or I see the CD corner or the CB corner. Knowing where your firefighters may need to get out if you got to call for that. So once you do that, your eyes are on everything. You got a crew on the roof. You have to be watching out for their well-being. You have backup lines and search and rescue teams going, and the RIT team has to be established, and salvage and overhaul, and all the moving parts of a working fire have to be monitored for safety. And so it's a big component of the fireground and any fire scene. Safety is paramount, and not for yourself as an individual, but your firefighters, the civilian public, the bystanders, the pets, the animals, and all that's within that, range zone or hot zone of that fire, if you will. You're responsible for all of that. And once safety is taken, you can't defer to firefighting or helping them move a ladder or anything like that. Once you become safety officer, that's you're locked into that till the fire is under control and or pulled out or put out, and then your firefighters roll out, and then you could relinquish safety or command itself to the fire marshal's office or otherwise. But those are the factors, in my opinion. Could you better serve by taking command, by putting more personnel into the structure to get more work done, or get more knowledge of what's happening on that second floor? In the command post, you can't go in there on the second floor and check for yourself. And sure, using the portable radios will always help you, but then you have so much communications going on, it sometimes compromises that as well. So sometimes the best part is just to get a body and get a crew and get them in there and report back to me. What do we have? We've had some fires in West Shore where myself and Deputy Chief Zayas has been requested to by command to gear up, pack up, and go inside in a couple warehouse jobs that we had, because we just needed the better feel for command and a better sense of what was going on in there. Not because the firefighters in there didn't know what was going on. It's just an added layer of protection, another set of eyes to potentially see should we or could we doing things better or different.
And I've heard you do that, and I've seen you do that. 503 Ocean Avenue last year in the Shore, I heard you on that audio. You were in there giving a briefing to command of what the conditions were while Truck 22 and the other units on scene operated. One of the defining images I have in my head 7 months ago at Dogburn, seeing you on the second floor, right outside on the balcony, providing in size up while 22 and Truck 1 operated inside. So it's a very critical thing to do, because not to say firefighters get tunnel vision, but each firefighter has a role. The can, the roof, the nozzle, whatever the case may be, that they're focused on that role as they should be. Having that extra set of eyes could help identify a hazard that they may not be aware of. California Street, on the radio once again, you identified a compromised staircase, which hugely helped operations, because now they know, okay, let's be mindful of this, and it's one less thing to worry about in the fireground.
And again, another call, we had a Mayday call, and I was safety that day, and I heard it. And I said, we have a Mayday, and no one else apparently at that moment had heard it. So command, and I believe it was Captain Perry, called in and to ERS, and ERS confirmed that in fact we did have a Mayday call go out. It was precautionary, and it all ended on a good way, that no one was injured, or thank God. But you also brought up those other fires. The Dogwood specifically, Mike. If you remember, we had a civilian taken out of there who was there. They were very compromised, to say the least. So I know you were there, so you remember your visual of that. We had 4 firefighters working on that one victim. So where does that put us? 4 firefighters down on the rest of the operation. So there's some times where you have to call an audible, if you will, and do some different roles for the reasons we both just mentioned.
The last question I'll ask you, and we've touched on it extensively, but if we could condense it to a concise thought or two, to aspiring fire officers, those studying to be promoted, or those who have recently been promoted, from the vantage point of someone who has been a fire officer for 23 years now, what advice would you give them based off your experiences?
Well, there's a lot, and and there's different parts to that. You should never want to give an order to a firefighter to do a task that you wouldn't want to do yourself, or that you haven't done yourself. And that goes for fireground, station, or otherwise. But to answer that question a little better, the advice I would give them would be, as I stated earlier, do the work. If you're unfamiliar with something, learn it. If you're unfamiliar with the area, any area, on your way home, drive through there. I spoke of Meadowbrook before. I would go by there to get to home in the morning, the next morning. Now, I could either take many different ways to get home, and many mornings I just drive through Meadowbrook, one end to the other. I already knew where the hydrants were, but I would look again. I went to school in that area as a younger kid, so fives was never tricky to me because we hung around there. But when I would have had firefighters come up to fives for their first time sometime, or driving, or just while they're learning to drive, Louie and Fogdo and myself had a little, I don't call it a game, but we would bring them up Bullhill Lane over to Night Lane. And at the light at Night Lane, we'd tell them, take a right and get us back to fives. And you can't ask us how to get there. We'd take them over to Bullhill Lane and Night Lane, Bullhill Road to Night Lane, and tell them, take a right and get us back to Engine 25, and you can't ask us for any directions or help. And a lot of firefighters, weaved their way through back to Engine 25. Some others did, and it would get caught going in a couple circles and get a little confused, and then you had to teach them that, listen, there's only one way in and one way out of Fives area. That's Night Lane and Malloy Road. And once you pull into Night Lane, all roads lead to Malloy. It may take you slightly longer by 30 seconds or a minute to get to Malloy Road, but every road will lead you out eventually to Malloy Road. And you had to learn your way around there. So the advice to new officers to be repetitive is learn your area. Know where you're unsure of things and focus on those things that you're unsure of. So you just get sharper and better at your knowledge in those areas and then whether that be the apparatus itself or the duties of the second due engine when you're coming from fives to this area or vice versa. We're going to go back soon to having officers on 21 and know your floor above responsibilities and know to never do a charge on the floor above without a charged hose line. which we don't. We never got away from it. We never done, but we changed some things in our command structure before we went to CAR 68. So we weren't having the SOP state. You know, the first line was seat of the fire, and the second line was the floor above. We had made some changes in that. We still had lines going to the floor above, but not quite in that immediate sequence. So get back to knowing those SOPs and your areas, and practice your size up. Look at the building and say, if that was on fire, what would I tell people when I got here? You know, the type of construction, the size, where's the fire, where's your hydrants, what your immediate actions were. Are you defensive? Are you offensive with your attack? You know, does 22 need to know that upon arrival, we need the roof opened? And if that be the case, let them know. So they don't know coming in, am I raising the stick? Am I not raising the stick? Am I cutting? Am I not cutting? They already know coming in that they're planting that ladder and they're going to the roof to make a hole. So again, size up. You know, one of the things which is so important, size up. The more information that you give to your own responding firefighters that are with you, and the oncoming firefighters even from other districts, the better off you're all going to be. And fortunately, for the time that I spent as a line officer, one of the proudest things I can say are not fires that went out and things that we did or things that we accomplished. Personally, one of the proudest things that I have ever can still sit here and say is no order that I ever gave to a firefighter ended them getting injured, hurt, or lose time from their family or work. And as a young officer or as a seasoned officer, if you can end your career and say that, well, then you've done your job and you've served your department well. Accidents happen, injuries happen. That's an unfortunate part of this job. But if you're fortunate enough to be able to say that, then that's a proud moment in your career.
This concludes part one of our ongoing command project, highlighting different fire officers from the Center District as part of an ongoing project, as we said, to showcase fires or different incidents of a challenging nature through the perspective of fire officers. Today's subject was Deputy Chief of Administration William Johnson.